In today's tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to knit a folded over or double collar. And a double collar, I'm currently knitting another version of my All the Vine Yoke Sweater. And so in this sweater, we knit a double or folded over collar. So it gives a nice thick look. It makes a little bit more of a statement. I'll show you a few other examples. This is a folded over collar that is part of my Southern Coastline sweater. It's knit just in stockinette stitch and folded over. And in my All the Vines one, it's knit in a 1x1 rib. It's a very popular way to knit a collar. You can knit it from the top down or you can add it on later. So my All the Vines yoke sweater is a top down sweater. So we start with this collar and we'll fold it over. You can add it to something like a vest. So if you have a pattern that doesn't necessarily call for a double collar, you can pick up stitches, for example, and make a folded over collar, but you're just going to bind off as you go. So I'll show you both the ways. I wanted to show you one other example. This is, it's hard to see here, but this is a sweater that I purchased. This is a Line sweater. I'll link this, but this is a very cool sweater. And this has a folded over double collar as well. So when you knit a double collar, if you're altering a pattern, if the pattern tells you to work for 1.5 inches, you're going to want to double the length. If the collar is already included in the pattern will have you knit to twice the, the pattern will tell you how long to knit to, so that when you fold it over, it is the length it's supposed to be. So I am just finishing up my last row here, and I'm just going to show you how to start to knit this folded over collar. So I'm slipping my stitch marker, and basically what we're going to do is pick up the outermost leg of the cast on edge for each stitch. So I'm starting with a knit stitch as my first stitch. So when I fold it over, I'm gonna follow this stitch down, but I am on the reverse side, so it will actually be this purl stitch. So I'm gonna follow this purl line all the way down to the end, and I'm going to grab the outermost leg of this purl stitch here. I'm going to make sure my yarn is over to the right here. You don't want it to get in the way, because if you fold it over, you don't want it to get trapped in your work. So make sure that's out of your way. And again, you're going to follow this line down. We want to make sure we're picking up a stitch for every stitch, because you don't want to be off with your stitches. So you have to be really careful not to skip stitches or get too many stitches, because then the top of the collar, it won't line up with the base, and you want to do your best to make sure it lines up. So I have my first stitch here. So I'm going to grab the outermost edge of this and just slide my left hand needle into that stitch on the outside. And then I'm simply going to just knit two together. And I'm knitting we'll be knitting all the way around. Even though this is a 1x1 rib, I'm going to knit every stitch, because I'm done with the collar and moving on to the stockinette stitch portion. So I've picked up and completed my first stitch, and now I'm going to look on this outside edge again and line it up, and it should be right next to where I just picked up. And so I will pick up this leg. Show you one more time. I'm going to pick up that outer leg right here, and I'm just going to knit two together. Again, making sure that your yarn is outside of the collar area so you don't accidentally knit that into the collar. So I've done my second stitch, again, going into the outer leg of the next stitch, knitting two together. And you're going to continue this all the way around, making sure you pick up that outer leg. I'm about halfway around, folding over the collar, and it's starting to look like this on the inside. And so again, I'm just continuing to pick up that outside leg of the cast on edge and knitting 2 together. All right, I've worked all the way around picking up the stitches. I've got one last stitch to pick up here. I'm gonna knit the last 2 together. And now I've completed my fold over collar, picking up each stitch all the way around the cast on edge. And now I'm just ready to knit in the round and continue the pattern directions that are in the pattern. So if you, again, this is great to add to a pattern if a pattern just calls for a simple collar and you want the folded over collar. This is a great way to modify a pattern with a little bit more interesting collar. It adds a little bit more structure to the collar if you want. So now I just wanted to take a minute to show you how to knit a fold over collar if you're picking up stitches, because then you'll actually need to bind off. In this method, when you start with the collar and you're working a top down sweater, you just pick up the outside edge and knit 2 together, but you're not binding off. All of these stitches are still on, so you can continue knitting in the round after you're done with the fold over collar. For this vest, for example, and I'll link this pattern in the video description, you pick up stitches and bind off for the collar. So in any situation, if you want to add a folded over collar in a collar situation where you pick up stitches, you would knit to twice the length. So in this case, I would just double this length and fold the work over, and I'll show you now how I would just bind off as I pick up stitches. So I would pick up the outside edge and knit 2 together for the first 2 stitches. 1, 2. And then I would start binding off as I go. So I would just lift that first stitch I knit over the second stitch and bind off. And then you just continue that as you go. So I work the next stitch and bind off as I work. So you can start to see that I'm binding off now. So that's how you knit a folded over collar when you need to pick up stitches and bind off. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will see you in the next video.